Okay, well, hello everybody. Great to be here again. So nice to be here 2 weeks in a row. Today we're going to do part 2 of what we promised you last week. So you'll recall that last week was all about preparation and distilling information, and Karen did a lot of the work with you on just really understanding what's the structure, what's your audience need from you, how are you going to tell the story, not too much detail, really planning it out well. And of course, as we said last week, this week is all about the way you deliver, which is really, something that you'll use forever. So it's great to be thinking about this every time you present, but particularly when you've got a big audience and you're really wanting to, tell that story and also tell the story of who you are. These delivery skills are really going to help bring that out. So yeah, it's great to be back. It's so fun to do this.
Absolutely great. Well, let us give you a sense of what it is we're actually going to cover in this session, and then we'll start diving into a little bit more detail. So the first thing that we want to work with you on is really starting to think about, well, what is your game plan for the actual pitch presentation? You've spent so much time on the project itself, really thinking about content and messaging and what should go in and what should not. And now it's about, well, what's the game plan, as Louise said, for how do we tell that story? And how do we actually deliver it in a way that's quite conversational and engaging, rather than completely formal and feeling like it's a real pitch. We want to make it a bit more of a conversation. So we'll talk a bit about game plan, and then we're going to focus on what it takes to create a confident impression in front of an audience. And then we'll break that down into really 3 main areas that we're going to focus on, and that's around your physical presence. We're going to talk about eye contact and engagement and how to get that connection with your audience, and also looking at your vocal energy and how to deliver something that actually has a little bit of spirit about it, as opposed to something that feels a little more monotone. So we'll work with you around voice as well.
Great. So, shall we begin?
We shall. So first we're going to talk about impressions, and in fact first we're going to talk about game plan, and then we'll move on to impressions.
Exactly. So game plan, I'm sure that you've already started to think about this, but we mentioned it a little bit last week as well, and this is really how are you going to showcase your team, as well as, make sure that that story is able to be, celebrated and shared within a very short space of time. So if you have maybe 4 or 5 team members, it's a question of, how do you make sure that you either acknowledge your team or everybody gets a chance to participate. Some of you will perhaps prefer to have 1 or 2 main speakers, but we also encourage you to really acknowledge the rest of the team. So whether it be that you have everybody on stage with you, if you've chosen not to do that, then potentially on your slide, on your backdrop, you might have photograph and name, and then you're actually introducing your team members who are not on stage with you. But I think most importantly, it's about making this a team effort. Just because you've got a couple of really confident speakers, it's not just the fact that they're represented and then maybe they look like it's all about their work. So really talking about the team, what everybody did, how they played a part. So you need to set that scene very quickly. Anything else?
Yeah. Look, and I think that's the important thing just to revisit, and I know we talked about this last week, is the timing around all of those things. So I think what Louise is talking about is quite a quick setup of that story, and then looking at, okay, how do we set the scene then for the actual agenda and what it is we're going to talk about, and then into the story and delivery, bearing in mind that you've got 5 minutes total. So I think that's important.
Yeah, and you can acknowledge that certain team members did certain things. So there might have been your research director, there might have been your creative person, there might have been the person who did the work with the China component, and then those that collaborated from Australia. So you can really break it down and make sure that everybody is really highlighted as having a key role. And then of course, once you've done that, it is about divvying up the work, perhaps more than one voice.
Yes.
We would recommend. You'll see that there are 2 of us sitting here right now. There's a reason behind that. And often, we will work together as not only a team of 2, but we might have others as well to share the voice and bring in a little bit of a different sound. But you'll notice with us and with HPC, as you meet more of us, there's something that's very consistent about the way that we go about doing what we do, and that comes through with each voice.
Absolutely.
So yeah, you are a team too, and I think showcasing that beautiful teamwork is really important. So when Karen's speaking and I'm looking at you, vice versa, when you've got speakers that are actually, taking the focal position, then actually really paying attention, acknowledging with the non-verbal, and making sure that it's really reinforced and the audience sees, here's a team, they are really there, sort of, being there for each other, and making sure that the whole team effort really comes to life.
Yeah, very much so. And that goes back to the transitions we talked about last week, where those really smooth handovers. So if you do have two presenters, it's really important that you've rehearsed it, both in what you're going to say and how you're going to verbalise those transitions. And also we'll talk a bit about using the space and the stage. So where you're actually going to physically stand and we'd be next to each other. So all of that you want to have played out in your rehearsals long in advance of going live in front of your pitch panel.
And in fact, just before you do go live, we're hoping to have that brief run through that Karen will have each team for just a short amount of time. So you want to be organised when you come into that space. It's not about the first time you said it live. It's really perfecting the last minute things so that Karen can sit there as an audience member, excuse me, and be able to just give you those fine tweakings, because it's not about let's create the actual show now. It's like, let's just fine tune it. So it's saying it on your feet a lot before that is going to really help.
Great, and we would do that in the camp week, so you would have had a chance to get together. So before we come together, definitely to have rehearsed that as a team, because those sessions will be short and sharp, but hopefully very beneficial in terms of those one or two things that's really going to make the difference for you as you go live to present.
Great. So, talking about making an impression. So, yeah, this is a really old study, and it's something that you would definitely have seen before, but this is a really good time to really perhaps just reinforce what does make an impact on an audience. And as you know, when you are in the audience and you're watching a presenter, you've really made a lot of decisions about how this is going to be well before someone or some people start talking content. And I think that's very important for you to remember. So as you're positioning yourself on stage, there's nothing being said, but in fact, there's volumes being said, because the organisation that people see, then of course the way that you carry yourself, the way that you assemble, how absolutely together it looks, that's a very visual impression. And that in fact creates a very big baseline for how people are going to receive what it is when you ultimately start talking. So the visual, huge. In fact, the percentage there is 55% of the impact that people are going to receive of you. It's visual, and that's really, it's the impact of confidence that people are going to receive. So it is, as I said, being organised, looking like a team, and carrying yourself with some confidence and self-awareness. Of course, the next largest piece is actually the sound that you make. How quickly you speak, or how controlled you are. In fact, some pauses, really filling that space where there is no content, with eye contact, with facial expression and so on. And then the highs and the lows, just like that. Clear your throat before you start, because that's going to otherwise mean that you're going to have to cough. So the vocal variety, and Karen's going to work on the vocal as well today with you, so that you can practice some ways of getting some energy into your voice. I mean, ultimately we're responding to, does someone look comfortable in this space, in this arena? If you haven't used a stage or been a performer very much, it's a big ask to suddenly be comfortable in a space that is not your own. So again, that's the reason for lots of rehearsal. Think back to any drama you've ever done, think back to the drama you've created, think back to the way that you've told a story, and then you will be able to bring aspects of those older experiences into the one that you're creating. Of course, the final piece, the tipping point of the triangle, is the 7% content, and that's the words that you use and the words that you've put together. Now, of course, without words, non-verbal and just a great sound is not going to be enough, so we want content to be very meaningful. But it ultimately comes down to the way you've set yourself up for success, the experience that you take people through as they are seeing you and hearing you, and then ultimately they will be listening to you and staying with you if your structure is great and the way that you're delivering is with animation and sense of energy. So yeah, that's the key there. Old study, but very relevant.
Absolutely. And so we are going to start really with that visual, and we're going to start by looking at your physical presence and how you own the stage. So give us one moment to reset our own stage, and we will be right back with you to talk through some of those physical aspects.
Bye. Okay, everybody, so as we said before, the baseline of creating a confident impression is really very much what do people see. And in this situation, they're looking right at you. They're not just hearing you, they're actually seeing you physically. And in that instance, you want to think about, well, how do I represent myself and what do I want them to actually perceive of me in this moment? So a couple of things. We did a little bit of work in Shanghai, obviously, together, and we started to touch on, you know, what that beautiful posture and body language can say for you and about you. And this really is the universal language. It doesn't matter whether we grow up in one country or another, body language is very universal. And we read body language very intimately and innately. So let's just do a couple of little things, and you know, I'm imagining you in your lounge room doing this with me. So, and of course we can have the studio audience do this as well, because we do have one today. So I'm just going to get you to think about a couple of things. So first of all, your chest, all right? So if you were standing and talking in earnest and your body is crunched and it's all very, very, you know, sort of important stuff you're talking about, you're not going to look as confident as if you lift your chest. There's something about that lovely uplifted body at the top of your chest, the whole physicality of your torso, that if you're standing strong and you're standing well, people feel very confident in you and very trusting of you. So your words have so much more meaning if your body is actually saying the same thing. People often ask me, well, what do I do with my hands? They feel like, you know, if I just have them by my side, they're just sort of hanging. And I always say that if you've got lovely posture, then your hands, your arms can actually just be by your side. But when you're in action and you're speaking, you'll notice that what happens to my hands and Karen as well, it's pretty natural. So you'll want to express yourself with hand gestures, but you'll also probably want some sort of a homing position. So you might be introducing your team members and looking at them, you might be gesturing to them, but it's not a big gesture, right? It's actually contained peripherally. You want to be able to see your hands, your arms from the corner of your eyes. So once they become too big and behind you, they've gone out of your eyesight, they're way too big and they're actually disjointing you as well. So chest, really important. You'll notice that I check myself, my weight, of where my body weight is quite often. And that's because I actually really want you all to be over your toes, over the balls of your feet. And you can check that by just lifting your heels off the ground. Maybe not necessarily whilst you're presenting like I am right now, but just so that you know that when you're standing sideways, you're not standing back, because if you're standing a little bit back, it's distancing your audience from you. I'm exaggerating, but I want you to actually be the opposite. I want you to be over your toes in that very active position. So, of course, when you're standing there and you've said nothing, you've actually said a lot by the way that you are standing and presenting yourself, and the way that you're looking out, making eye contact, reaching the back of the room, making sure that people feel very connected to you, like this or over in the back corner. And Karen will talk about eye contact with you in a moment. But of course, great eye contact isn't enough if you don't have beautiful posture. All right, so let's think posture. I want you to start carrying yourself around from, you know, the house to the bus, from the train to the office, wherever you go. I want you to start to think about projecting something of yourself, so that people, you know, they don't really know you. They don't pass you thinking, oh, I know that person, but they think, wow, something's drawing me to that person's posture. And that's what you can do by actually sort of bringing that presence into play. A really good exercise to think about bringing that beautiful presence into the moment is a one we've probably talked about in Shanghai, but I'm going to just do one more time. I want you to think about, well, you've got a stage and you're going to potentially be on a stage. certainly in the finals, and that's where we want you all to be. So think about if you were to have stepped onto a dark stage, but you know that from your sound check there's a spot on the floor, and it's absolutely where you've got to stand. I want you to imagine that spotlight that is actually opening up, and you're on the right spot, and so is it. And so as that spotlight really does engulf you in light, I want you to think, well, how would I grow into that light? How would I grow into that moment? And if you just imagine that you are in a spotlight, and how you would feel when there's nothing else that's visible on that beautiful stage with the audience there but you. And you would rise to that occasion, and you would literally seek the light. And I want you to feel like around you, tracing your hands around your body, is exactly that pool of light. And when you're standing in that, you're standing in the moment, your body is reaching up, and you are presenting physically to the whole audience. So that's a nice exercise. You can do that to your mirror. You can do that with your family and friends at home. You can do that with your group and just feel that there's a presence about you, and it's extending as far as your fingertips will. So that's a pretty good balance and basis for how you put yourself in the moment, how you rise to the occasion, and how you bring physical presence to life. And as we said, that first impression of 55%, largely it is going to start with your body. And then, of course, the eye contact is going to come through. Let's not forget the facial expression, and having a sense of, actually, this is amazing. We have come this far. Here we are. We've got this fantastic journey to share with you, and feeling proud about that. So pride looks strong in the upper body. So they're my key messages for physical presence. Maybe the last thing is when you do move, and perhaps you move aside, let somebody else come in. Move with purpose, but then stand still once you've arrived. We don't want the moving around. It's distracting, it seems a little uncertain, and it doesn't give your audience that lovely sense of confidence and bearing which you bring to this story. So just be able to be really nice and still, and when you do move, know exactly where you're going, even if you are moving backward, and you're handing to your next presenter, which I am. Lovely, thank you.
All right, thanks, Louise. So once we've really got our physicality in place, one of the other key aspects around that visual is the way in which you engage eye contact with your audience. And this is really important on a number of levels. Eye contact is all about connection, and while that varies throughout culture and norms and what is acceptable or more so in one culture versus another, when it comes to presenting, it's such a critical element of building a relationship with your audience. So it's really important to master. The second aspect about eye contact is that it is how you showcase your confidence. When we're feeling a little anxious and a little under pressure, one of the first things we instinctually do is we break the eye contact. And when we do that, we take the power out of our message and we break that connection with the audience. So what we want to be able to do is to really have that strong eye contact rather than fleeting, flicking eye contact. And let's talk about why. So we think about the impression it creates. Some of the positive impressions that come from having that really great connected eye contact are things like trust. You seem genuine, authentic, interested, you're passionate, it comes across as more credible than if you've got fleeting, breaking eye contact. That's something we don't want, because then it comes across with too little eye contact as the opposite of all of those things. We look like we lack confidence. We can come across as a little bit aloof, even if that's not our intention. And I think what's really important with some of these delivery skills is the difference between your intention versus the perception that might create for someone. So if with eye contact, your intention is, this is all a little bit intense, I'm just going to break away for a moment, your intention is just to create space for yourself, but the perception might be lack of confidence. And so we want to make sure we've got a balance between those two things. At the same time, as with anything, too much of something is not always a good thing. So when we use too much eye contact, sometimes we can come across as a little bit aggressive. We're kind of bearing down on the person. And it is a little bit intimidating. It feels a little bit too direct for some people. So, you know, it's just that balance. But on the whole, it is our way of connecting, and it is our way of showing confidence. And those are really critical. So that's why it's important. But let us share with you a little about how do you engage eye contact, both in an intimate setting, and also for those of you that go through to the big grand finale, it's going to be a big setting. So you might have 500 people in the audience that you're having to appeal to. And so we'll show you the ways in which you might do that. So let's start firstly with tailoring for that more intimate setting. Now, the idea that we talk about is to direct one thought to one person. Now, a thought is roughly where you naturally take a breath. You know, it's a natural pause point. Not always at the end of a sentence, but certainly at a moment of pause. And the idea is that we direct our focus, one thought to one person, randomly. So as I just bring up these different arrows on our slide here, the idea is that we want to engage with every single person that in this case will be on your pitch panel. So you might have 3, you might have 5 on the panel. You want to make sure that each person has had an equivalent amount of eye contact and focus. So as we're directing that one thought, we're actually engaging eye contact. So if you're speaking, you really should be looking someone in the eye. The other element we don't want to see is where you're actually talking to your slide, and so your focus is behind you, or you're constantly flipping your head. So in order to avoid that, we want to take a bit of a step back, and we create a triangle between where we stand, our slide, and our audience. And that allows us to do a technique that we call touch, turn and talk. And it's the idea that we collect the content or the point that we want to say, we turn our focus and we engage eye contact as we speak. So there are little techniques that again take a little bit of rehearsal. So these are the things that I'm keen for you to be practicing before we all come together in Sydney. So that's the strategy or the focus for a smaller group. But of course, when you go to a much larger audience, it's hard to engage individual eye contact and would look a little erratic. So what we do there is we have a clustering technique. And so what you want to do is, you know, with that audience of 500, if you're up on the stage at Town Hall, you're really dividing that audience into subsections of people. And while you might engage one person's eye contact in that group or that area or that region, everyone around them is going to feel that direct connection and contact with you. And that's due to the proximity, the distance of where you are up on stage and where that person is sitting a little further away in the audience. And for those of you that have perhaps been to the theatre, or you might have been to see a performer at a big concert, you'll see them apply that technique. And they sing to the people in the front row, and then they sing to the people in the back row. And that's that way of drawing focus from the audience and having that emotional connection with everybody in the room. So again, for those going through to the big stage, we will work together and do a little bit of practice around that before you're having to engage on that kind of scale, because it's a very different feeling to be presenting to that size audience. So the points then around eye contact are, it is about connection, it's about confidence, and it's the way in which you build relationships. And so that one thought to one person technique is worth practicing. And that might be that you know, just to get it top of mind for you, it might be that you have your lounge at home and you put cushions out and you practice just directing one thought to one person. It might be that you've got family and you can sit your kids down and you can practice one thought to one person. So however you do it, or certainly in your presentation rehearsals, really try to coach each other because it does take practice. And our natural tendency is to be a little shy about it. And so we need a little bit of stretching of our comfort zone to be able to hold eye contact in that little bit more of a direct way. All right, so that's eye contact. Let us move on now, though, to talk about your vocal energy. Because so much of your passion and persuasion comes through in the way in which you deliver vocally. So there's, you know, a couple of things that we're going to focus on to help you understand what matters in the way that you engage. So the first one we're going to look at is this idea of modulation. Now, in really simple terms, modulation, it's the highs and the lows. It's that light and the shade in our vocal delivery. It's also what keeps your story interesting. So if we look at the bottom of our matrix here, if you start off with a very monotone voice, you know, if I was to say, good morning and welcome. My name's Karen Thomas and I'm a director with High Performance Coaching. If I start here, it's a really flat delivery. And you can only imagine over the next 30 minutes, or in your case 5 minutes, where the energy's going. It really is going south from that point. And so you need to start as you mean to go on. And we need to have that really strong and vibrant first impression. And that energy, for some of you, you may need to work on picking up so that it really does engage your audience. At the same time, we don't want to take it too far where we're heading up to that super energized delivery, because when we get too big and too expressive, we lose credibility. But I will guarantee you one thing, and that is that you've got more scope in your variety and modulation that is available to you while maintaining credibility than you probably use now. So again, you can practice with some children's stories, some famous speeches, any passage. You could actually grab the front page of a newspaper and use that as the content to start to practice using your voice and using that energy and vocal variety in your delivery. So modulation is important. The second aspect around voice that really matters is your projection. Now, some of you might be a little more softly spoken than others. Now, when it comes to presenting, we really need to work hard to make sure that our voice is heard. If I spoke to you and I had a really soft voice, and imagining my voice was a ball, if the ball lands here, it lands flat. Okay, so it just doesn't reach the audience. So what we really want to make sure is that our voice actually touches people. You almost want it to hit someone in the chest. Not knock them over where it's too strong, but certainly so that it feels like it lands. And again, when it comes to perception and impression, whether it's right or wrong, the perception of someone who is really softly spoken when they're presenting is that they're lacking confidence in their message. And that may not be the case. And that's why we need to work at building that stronger voice so we create that perception of confidence and that perception of impact. At the same time, your voice is a bit like personal space. You know, if it's too booming and it's too loud, it almost impinges on someone's sense of space, and they've almost got a physical reaction to want to just push that away and create a bit of space. So we don't want your voice to be so loud that it's overbearing. So just getting that balance right, and as I said, it is about just how do you ensure that your voice lands. And the bigger the audience, the bigger the auditorium, the bigger the vocal impact needs to be. And by that stage though, you will be mic'd, and so that will project your voice as well. So there's more skills to learn around using that kind of equipment as well. So we've talked about modulation, our highs and lows. We want to project in a way that lands. And the last thing, which is very important, is the way in which you pause. Because pausing does a lot of things. For you as the presenter, it helps you gather your thoughts. It ensures that you breathe, which is very important, and there will be an element of nerves, and there will be that little bit of anxiety as you go live. And it is our breath that allows us to maintain that projection and maintain energy. But when we get nervous, and sometimes we get a bit racy, and when we start to present and we're getting faster and faster, our breathing becomes very shallow. And that's when we start to lose that vocal strength. It's also when our thought patterns become less strong. So I really encourage you around your delivery and certainly in your rehearsal to be really conscious of pace and taking that pause for yourself, but also it helps your message land for the audience, and that's equally important. You need to remember that you have lived and breathed this for the last 90 days, but for your audience, it's the first time that they're hearing it. So simple messages, clear messages, and well-paced delivery is really going to help with their sense of understanding. And don't fall prey to the pressure of time. So sometimes we think, oh my gosh, we've only got 5 minutes, and there's so much we want to say. Less is more. Say less and have it be a stronger message than trying to fit so much in that you deliver it in such a pacey way that it really does lose impact. All right, so for now, we are going to just take a moment to see if there are any questions coming in around the things that we've covered with game plan. Louise talking about the physical presence and really owning the stage. Eye contact and engagement right through to vocal energy and really building that vocal impact. So let us go to you and see if there's any questions, and then we can answer those before we start to wrap up. All right, thanks.
Okay, so a couple of questions have come in. One of them that relates very much to what you finished off with was how long to pause for. And I'll just give my point of view and then maybe hand to Karen as well. I think a pause needs to feel natural. You know, if you milk a pause for a little bit too long, it actually is a little, sort of almost ostentatious. It's almost like, and that was just a bit too much. So it needs to feel quite natural, but at the same time, I think also it depends on you filling that moment with something else. And that is the eye contact, the body intensity, let's call it, that sense of, I'm just allowing you a moment rather than I'm forgetting what I was talking about and taking a moment for myself. What else do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's really important, and I agree. You don't want to overplay it because it looks then a little contrived and a little staged. But the thing that I will say is that often the pause for the presenter can feel like an eternity, and you feel like you've fallen into a black hole. And yet for the audience, you know, that it's a split second done naturally. So it is about getting the balance. So don't feel like that pause, it makes it look like you've forgotten what you're saying. In fact, it actually makes you seem so in control and in the moment. You know, and unless you then draw that out extensively, it comes across as just really confident and composed. And that's the look that we're going for. So.
And if you're going to move and take those purposeful steps that I talked about earlier, so you would pause and then you would take the step and then you would position yourself and deliver to another cluster in your eye contact technique. And then that looks very much like you really know where you're taking your audience. So that's the pause. Another question that we had from our studio audience was to talk about how do you go about managing the memory aspect. So when you're doing your initial heats and you've got maybe your panel of 5 and a certain sized audience, but you're not in town hall in the big finale, is it okay to use palm cards or to try and perhaps have some notes? Ideally, you won't, right? Bottom line. You know, be as clear as you can be in terms of what is that message map. And if you use the planner that we introduced to you last time round, and your 3 agenda points, and then your 3 subsets per agenda point, it will give you such a memory map that those points will probably come to you, and then you're sharing the 4 minutes with someone. You're probably unlikely to take the whole presentation on board yourself. So at least 2 voices. But if you are in the moment, you're mid-moment, and you said something, and then your team who are sitting up on stage with you or sitting close by realise that you've left out something, or you've actually sort of stopped the flow and you can't remember, then there's the opportunity for teamwork. It's live, it's real. People will be so happy if Karen was to say, oh, another thing there to remember, Louise, also is X, and then, just very gently slide in and contribute, and then go out again, because
Absolutely.
then this person, like me, will be back on track again.
And it just gives your partner then a moment to recalibrate and recollect their thoughts, and they can go again. And then the one thing I will say though, which is not to do, is don't talk over your partner at any point, and don't fall into the trap if they've forgotten something of saying, actually what she meant to say was this. Because it completely undermines that person's confidence, and it really destroys that sense of partnership. So, you'll notice with us, your goal is to set that person up for success. And so the way that you step in, it's to support, it's to be the team player. And your goal is that as a team you look successful. It's not about any one individual, shining at the expense of others. So and that's where your rehearsal becomes really important, and just anticipating, well, what will we do if, and just having a couple of contingency plans top of mind to help you through.
On that too, something that does come to mind. So in our teamwork, often will be Karen has written the program that we're delivering. And if I'm not connected enough to what Karen has written, and yet I'm delivering part of it, it's very much harder to remember it. So if you've just got one person that's actually writing the presentation, and the rest of you feel like, well, I did the research, and I did the props, and I'm actually presenting it, so great, thanks for doing all of that. If you've not been workshopping those words together, it will be very difficult for you all to feel as involved with that end presentation and what those words are. So as much as it might be a good time management technique to go, well, you did this bit, you did that bit, we really recommend, because I've been in that moment where I didn't write it and I'm like, and over to Karen.
Hard to believe that happens, but every now and then.
Yeah, there's been a couple of really great savey moments there. So, certainly be there for your team member to pick up, but, workshop the words that are going to be spoken by everybody, so that you are all involved with what those words are.
Yeah, and rehearse. You can't rehearse enough in the lead up to that 5-minute pitch, and getting feedback from the team around what's working and what might be one or two things each time that will add value or make that a stronger pitch presentation. One of the questions too was around palm cards, and Louise mentioned, our goal is to not have them, and just to reassure you, you will have your slides. So as best you can in your rehearsal to have really distilled that content down, ideally you really are speaking from your slides. And that gives, again, it's that sense of confidence that you know the message that you're delivering and that you believe in it. And when we have those palm cards, it just takes a little bit of that persuasiveness and power out of the message.
If you're rehearsing, you might like to, start with your palm cards. You can even hold them in your hand. We're not live at this point, I'm telling you. You're in rehearsal mode, but you've set it up and you feel like you've got an audience there, and maybe you do. But actually, you'll realise that, in fact, as you say a piece of your presentation, just literally throw your palm card on the floor. As if you're throwing it away because you don't need it. And then as you say the next bit, throw it on the floor as well. The next rehearsal, you probably won't even step up with palm cards. So just psychologically say to yourself, my goal is to not have a card in my hand or to read anything, because you know that the power dynamic is really reduced as soon as you've got the evidence of, I can't really remember the whole message. We really want 4 minutes to be a story. It doesn't have to come out perfectly. It really is so much better if it's natural and a bit like this, pretty ad-libbed.
Yeah, which is important, because you've got to remember the audience doesn't know what you meant to say. They only know what you do say. And so even though you might have written it out verbatim and it's perfect on the page, the audience doesn't know that that's how it was meant to be, So you've just got to go with it and trust yourself, and that's a little bit of that positive mindset, and go with your first idea. Don't let that analytical mind kick in where you start to question every aspect of it, because you lose your fluidity and you lose your authenticity and you lose your confidence, and that's not where you want to go.
When you're in the week and you have everybody back together in Sydney, literally sit around in a circle like actors reading a script, right? So, it's like you can be reading it at that point, and you can be bouncing off each other, and you can all be contributing and remembering the pieces of the puzzle and piecing it together. And then when you do get up, as actors do, you don't bring your rehearsal notes with you, right? So you've actually sort of adjusted yourself to know that it's in your mind. And it's a little bit like rote learning at the end, which is why it does have to be written ahead of time. So be thinking about, you've got a couple of weeks left. By the week before you all come back together, try and have your script nailed.
Yeah.
Don't be leaving it till the last minute.
Absolutely.
Other questions from the studio audience?
We had one on just referencing something we talked about last week about number of presenters.
Oh, yes.
So again, look, our recommendation is probably not 5 speakers for 5 minutes. Only because it's just very hard with your transitioning from one person to the next, and if one person even overtalks by 30 seconds, the knock-on effect over that 5 minutes is actually great. And if the time is pulled at the end and you haven't got through your presentation, it's kind of disappointing for everyone. So whether it's one person or 2, and we would recommend 2 for all the reasons we've talked about with different voices, and also someone to save you if you kind of get a bit stuck in the moment. 2 is a great number, and again, you can work out how then you showcase the rest of the team, whether that's on a slide or they're nearby. But 2's a good number.
Yeah, or 3. I mean, you don't have to stick, you don't have to all be the same, you don't have to be formulaic about it. In fact, we don't want you to be. So if you've got, 3 great speakers, find a way.
Yeah.
Just find a way, but really respect the fact that that last speaker needs to have some time. Or they're doing the top and tail, so they're introducing it and they're closing. And you've got a couple of people in the middle that are doing the key things. Yeah, and we have another question, yes.
Given in our teams not everyone has English as the first language, the audience will predominantly be English speaking.
Yeah.
I gather that the rehearsals and everything are really critical to making sure everyone is really confident and included in the aspect of the presentation.
Oh, absolutely. It would be, quite fun when you're in rehearsal to actually have, your 2 English speakers, and then you have maybe a couple of people who, if you've got a couple of people in your group that are in fact the Chinese contingent, then say it in Mandarin. Just like bring it to life in Mandarin. You may not deliver it that way, but it's really lovely for people to sort of, this is what I interpret it as, and who knows, there might actually be an opportunity for a little bit of Mandarin to be spoken in that presentation, just a couple of key lines. You may have some, predominantly Chinese speakers in the audience, and why not?
Absolutely. That's the whole purpose.
Combination of the China-Australia relationships. What can we learn from China?
Yeah.
What can China learn from Australia? So have a balance, there's no doubt, and potentially, if you've got a couple of the Chinese team members, get in there and do a little bit in English, or maybe you have a lovely couple of end lines in Mandarin. It'd be great to see.
Absolutely, and it's just confidence, that's all. It's about that rehearsal and practice, so that for your piece, whatever that piece is, whether it's a big piece or a small piece, that you feel confident in the way that you deliver it.
Yeah. And there's always more inside of everybody than we assume. So if you decide that you'd love to have both nations represented, and we'd love that, just take the time and nurture people to that confident place. And gosh, what we see people achieve quickly in terms of, well, I didn't know I was a presenter, but look at me, I'm doing it. And how great is that? It's a personal development experience at the same time as coming up with a great idea and landing some messages. So take it on board that way.
All right, I think that's it for our questions.
Yeah, and I think it's very clear to say, be yourself and have fun. This journey will be remembered for more than just the last event. This is a 100-day journey, and you're very much, getting toward the end of that. But it'll be the relationships that you've built. It'll be the shared experience that you have had with one another. And don't leave this feeling like, oh, we didn't nail it perfectly, so the whole thing is less than what it should have been. This is a collective experience of a lot of different pieces of the puzzle. So, just do your best.
And be proud. You know, I think that this last showcase is very much about this is what we've done, this is what we've achieved, and you've all worked enormously hard to get to this point. So, you know, when you step out there, you're basically just sharing your story. That's what it's about. Don't think of it as a pitch and it's got to have a certain, you know, rigidity about it. It's just you sharing the journey that you've been on and the results that you've been able to achieve and what it is that you want to put forward as your idea or business proposition. So yeah, walk out there with a sense of pride because it's been an enormous effort all round.
The only other final thing that I just remembered is Q&A, and there may be time for some questions, and there may be a couple of questions that you would like to take. It may be at that time that you can bring in a different team member if it really suits someone's expertise. So potentially be ready for that. I would workshop that as well as a group. You know, what might be the questions? You know, when you've come up with what you want to present as, you know, this is the piece that we're going to deliver, think, well, what might that, you know, encourage people to ask about, and then get ready with some workshopped answers to be able to deliver on those potential questions that you can probably imagine ahead of time. So that might be a nice way to bring in a couple of the other speakers as well.
Very much. And remembering too, at that point, you've done your 5 minutes, you might get 1 or 2 questions from the panel, really succinct answers. So when you're workshopping, as always, saying workshop, here's a likely question, here's how we'd respond, and be really mindful that you need really short and sharp, persuasive answers to those questions, because time will very much be of the essence at that moment.
Last words, you'll win a lot of respect by being on time.
Yes.
You know, it's a time-pressured situation. There's a lot of teams to get through. Everybody wants to hear what you've got to say, and when it's said, they want you to respectfully leave it to the next team. So really, you know, take it down to what you can achieve in that time frame.
Very much so. Great. All right. Well, that is all from us, and we will certainly look forward. Louise won't see you in Sydney, but I certainly will, and I'll have at least one other of our senior coaches to come and work with you in the Sydney week. So we're very much looking forward to that.
Yes. I'll be overseas, so I will see you along the way. You know, this is the camp family, so we're very much a part of it. Thanks, everyone. Good luck.
Great. See you in Sydney.